Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this Women in Propane Council Leadership Lens webinar, our third in 2023. I'm Bridget Perino, and I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the NPGA Women in Propane Council. So following all of our webinars since last November, we've asked each attendee who answers our exit survey to help us determine topics for a future event. And diversity has consistently garnered votes. Personally, I don't think there is a better time than today to talk about this topic. So thank you all for tuning in. We have an incredible lineup today. First, let me remind you that you may use your Zoom webinar controls to participate in our polls today. We have 2 of them coming up. We also welcome your questions, so please use the Q&A facility. If you hover at the bottom of your screen, you'll see that there, rather than the chat box. That allows us to see the question and be able to respond to you offline as well, and also after the fact. So please use the question box facility for that. And when you leave the webinar, finally, at the end of this incredible session, you'll see a very quick 2-question survey. How'd we do, and what other topics are you anxious to hear from the Women in Propane Council? Let us know that, and we'll get right onto that in our upcoming programs. So welcome. I'll let you know we're also recording the session today, and the recording will be mailed out to anyone who registered for the event in advance of the event later on this afternoon. So something to look forward to as well. Please remember, share this video with your colleagues, people that you work with, people who weren't able to come, people who didn't think to come. I think it's going to be useful for everyone to take a look at some point in time. So to kick things off today, I'm delighted to introduce my colleague in the Women in Propane Council, Paula Summers. Paula is the chair of the Women in Propane Council and also the VP of Sales and Strategic Partnerships at Civista Leasing and Finance. So today, Paula is here to welcome you all. Paula?
Thank you so much, Bridget, and thank you everyone for joining us today. The Women in Propane webinars are just one of the many programs that the Women in Propane Council of NPGA offers to all NPGA members. We have our webinar series, so thank you for joining us on this today. We have our podcast series. We also have a knowledge exchange program, which is a mentorship program. And we also have a very robust state ambassador program, which is encouraging networking and engagement at the local level. All of these wonderful programs can be found on our website, womeninpropane.org. We also have a couple of upcoming events I wanted to share with everyone. The Board of Directors NPGA meeting in Louisville next month. The Women in Propane will have our annual fall meeting there. And we will also have the popular no-host luncheon. So if you're coming to Louisville, please join us for those events. And also the NPGA Southeastern Expo in April in Charlotte. We'll be presenting a disc training, and we'll also be having our roundtable, which will be the Women in Propane podcast live. So it's going to be really exciting, and I hope everyone can join us. Thank you. Bridget, you are on mute.
Thank you, Paula. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for that wealth of information. And of course, you can email us at WIP, that stands for Women in Propane, at npga.org. You can also contact us via womeninpropane.org. So feel free to reach out. We, as Paula said, we have many helpful programs and opportunities just to engage at another level within the industry. We encourage you all to do that, men and women. So thank you all. Now, first of all, we'd like to run a quick poll. It's always interesting to see who's on the call today. So if we can bring up that first poll question, what is your company's role in the propane industry? Are you a propane marketer? Use your webinar controls at the bottom to respond. Are you a propane supplier, a service provider, a technology partner, an industry association? Are you with the media? Are you other? And we'll get good at saying what other is at some point soon in the future. But, oh, interesting. We've got a big contingent here forming. So this is great. We've got about 64% of you have got the hang of it. We appreciate it if everyone would just jump in there and give us a quick answer. Hopefully we've got you covered on this poll, and then we'll share those results with everybody. We're at about 76% participated. Let's see if we can get over that 80% mark. All right, we're there. We're into the 80s. Valerie, if you wouldn't mind sharing the poll results for everybody, please. All right. So as you can see, we've got a big contingent from the propane supplier front, but also propane marketers and service providers following along behind that. So that's always interesting to know. And panelists, which we'll introduce them in a minute, you will note that this may be particularly interesting from some of the questions that we get in the panel discussion. You might be able to refer to some of that information as we go through. So I'll leave that with you. All right. I'd like to introduce our panel going forward in a minute, but I just want to make a few points. First of all, one of them is there's a lot of research out there about diversity in the workplace. And one group in particular, McKinsey & Co., has been examining diversity in the workplace for a number of years. Their study, Diversity Matters, examined proprietary data sets of over 366, I think it was exactly 366 public companies across a range of industries across Canada, Latin America, the United Kingdom, and the United States. And in this research, they looked at metrics such as financial results and the composition of top management and board within these organizations. And I think it's very apropos and interesting. The findings were clear. Companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. And also, companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 15% more likely to have financial returns above their respective national industry medians. So, you know, there's a lot of research out there. I know that there's a lot of activity in the industry. You know, I think speaking to everyone on the call today, you know, what do you think makes up the most valuable asset of your brand when you think about it, right? And I'm going to suggest that it's not your technology, and it's not even the services that you provide either. Those honors belong to your employees, and they are the anchor to everything that is going in the right direction for your company. But what if the answer is diversity? Not only is it about time the topic got the attention of management and decision makers, but it's also a time that we take a look at it with a bird's eye view. And McKinsey believes that brands that haven't embraced diversity already should be making adjustments to accommodate it. There's a richness in diversity, as it gives your business a well-balanced setup that it's lacking in a homogeneous work environment. It also helps with business growth. So I think it's pretty fascinating research and thoughts on this, and it's definitely a timely topic for us to talk about today as we go through this event. I'm going to actually bring up the presentation I have here so I can introduce our panelists before we jump into the panel discussion. So let me just share my screen for a second and bring that up. Just bear with me 1 second while I put that onto a different screen.
I want to remind the audience that all of our webinars are recorded, and you can find links to all Women in Propane webinars on the website, womeninpropane.org.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for that brief interlude there while I get my technology sorted out here. Okay, we'll just put this down onto this one here and bring that up. There we go. Okay, so let me just share that screen for you right now. So I'm truly delighted with the panel that we have pulled together for the session. Hope that you can see the screen up there right now. As I mentioned, I'm Bridget Perino. I'm the Vice Chair of the Women in Propane Council. I'm going to start with Kimberly Bankston. We're going to call you Kim today, if that's okay. Kim is the Vice President of Talent Management and Diversity at UGI Corporation. And that also obviously includes AmeriGas. So welcome, Kim. Thanks for joining us. We also have Regina Garasino, my colleague at Enova. She is the Chief Operating Officer. She's responsible for manufacturing and operations across our global operation. Thank you so much, Regina, for coming with us today on this journey. Jennifer Jarbo is the SVP of Human Resources at Thompson Gas. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. Lisa Zuppis is the VP of Strategic Operations at Ferrellgas. Thank you for joining us, Lisa. And of course, Paula Summers, thank you for joining us on the panel as well today. I'm really excited about the discussion that we're going to have. All right, so with that, let me kick off with the first question, which is, we're going to be talking about what is a culture of diversity, what is building a culture of diversity about? And Kim, if we can start with you, UGI Corp AmeriGas has over 10,000 employees across 18 countries. And you specifically are the head of talent and diversity there. So how do you view and define diversity?
Thank you. It's a great question. And if I look at my role with talent and diversity, they are symbiotic and they go hand in hand. What's important when we think about diversity, the way we have it is with our strategy around BI, belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity. So let me just break that down for a little bit, because I think that will help us kind of set the context for what we're going to talk about today. When we think about diversity, think about all of the elements that make up a potential employee population or a candidate population. A lot of times we think of that as demographics. Some of that is what I call the more traditional demographics, ethnicity, gender, such as women, but also there are other demographics, neurodiversity, military service, socioeconomic status. When you start think regional status, where do you live, right? How does that play into where you may want to work or how you work? When you look at that, that's diversity, that's the demographics. Inclusion is really what we have to strive to do. If we cast a wide net from a diversity perspective and bring a lot of people into our organization, how do people feel when they walk the halls? How do you have these programs that, pull people in and really bring out the best in everyone and make sure that everyone knows what they're doing, understands how to interact with each other? Sometimes we call it engagement. That's inclusion. Equity, remove the barriers, right? As you're bringing people in, how do you remove barriers? Historically, there might be different barriers. There might even be barriers you don't even know about, right? And then finally, when we think about belonging, that's what you reach from a journey perspective. That's when you have what we call the stickiness of, I've cast a wide net, I've brought a lot of people in, I've really had programs to work to make people feel that they belong in the organization, they can grow in the organization, and they have a future in the organization. And then they feel it, they know it, and they then reach out themselves and almost become ambassadors. That's the belonging piece. And so when we really think about the whole area of diversity, it's all of these elements, not just the demographics. You have to be focused in all of these areas.
That's a really helpful definition of all of those, of diversity, of inclusion, and of belonging really being internalized. Thank you for that. Paula, as a leasing and finance service provider and chair of the Women in Propane Council, what's your perspective here?
Well, I think it's important to realize in the propane industry, we're not just talking about, ethnic and gender diversity within our organizations, but we also have ethnic and gender diversity in our customer base, right? So thinking about the people that are delivering fuel, your next great employee referral may come from your driver who's out delivering fuel. So I think it's important to remember that, our customer bases are also diverse as well.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And they see who their provider and how their provider treats diversity or is diverse. So a good point. Lisa, so not only is Ferrellgas one of Newsweek's 2023 most trustworthy companies, I did my own little Googling on that one for you in America, but you're also the only large-scale US propane company now with a woman at the helm. So tell us more. I'm interested in what diversity means to Ferrellgas today.
That's right, Bridget. Not only do we have a female CEO, 40% of our executive leadership team are females as well. And I agree that diversity means bringing underrepresented groups into our industry. But I think it's also important that we bring those groups into our decision making. When we have diversified thoughts, discussing issues and collaborating, we reach better decisions. We all win when we have different voices at the table. But when we talk about a culture of diversity, I think it's really important that we're talking about respect, that we're talking about the expectation that our culture will envelop and connect people, and that we work together, like Kim was saying, to create that belonging.
It's such a great point. Respect. It's so true. Thank you. And Jennifer Jabo is the head of HR at Thompson Gas. Can you tell us what diversity means for today's leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important for leaders to recognize that diversity isn't just an HR strategy. It's a business strategy. And so HR cannot be the only group in the organization driving a diversity strategy, right? We have to figure out how do we integrate that into the day-to-day operation and everything that we're doing from the top down. So I think leaders today need to certainly recognize that it's part of the day-to-day business strategy and that they all have ownership over that. And there are small things that they can do every day. It can start with, as someone mentioned, making meetings more inclusive, ensuring that different voices are being heard and a part of decisions. But again, just verbalizing and being vulnerable to say this is important to us from the top down is a first step for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, I'd like to ask the panel now, how are we actually doing in terms of diversity in propane? Kim, would you care to kick off on that?
I think diversity in propane is very interesting because there's so many avenues into propane. I think with the work that we're doing around women in propane and some of the different efforts that are now coming forward in diversity, we're starting to see an increase, whether that's an increase on boards and representation, increase in leadership. For instance, in our AmeriGas business, about 50% of our leadership team is diverse, women and diverse. And then if we start going down to our director and below level, we also see that pipeline increasing. But we also have to be careful to look at the feeder jobs that are coming into our industry. A big job that we saw many people were in the propane distribution, drivers, right? While 58% of the workforce is women, for drivers in the CDL realm, only about anywhere from, depending upon the region, 2 to 7% of CDL drivers are women, right? Also, when you look at other ethnicities, again, very low. In some cases, 2 to 8%. So when you think about, that's a big pool of people that we're hiring. And so we're missing an opportunity. How do we get more women? How do we get more diverse talent into jobs such as our driver's jobs? Because back to what Paula said, this is not only about our employees, it's also about our customer base as well.
Exactly. Anyone else like to jump in on that? How are we doing in diversity in propane? You're making progress?
Yeah, if I could jump in, I think it's really important. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to diversify in propane, and industry diversification is an important one, right? And so I think traditionally, the pipeline for management or leadership positions has come from promoting from within. And that has typically not been a very diverse population to work with, right? And so I think thinking outside of the box and understanding that we can bring people into management that may not come from the propane industry is going to allow us to have that flexibility to get more people of color, to get more women in branch management and higher levels, right? Because we've got to start to kind of fill that pipeline and think a little bit outside the box in that regard. So I think that's a really important piece to look at as well.
Yeah, kind of like getting them on the ladder in the first place, right?
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
And giving them that little push, seeing the potential. Regina, anything to add on that?
Well, the one thing that I wanted to discuss was the importance of understanding and fostering diversity of thought and how important that is to making business decisions. We all know, and we've talked already about this, about how, various backgrounds, cultures, and experience can, when they come together to solve a problem, each of those people bring a unique perspective, and it leads to a more creative solution than if everyone had the same way of thinking. And I'd actually take it one step further and say that understanding perspective is a key leadership skill, and that there's great value in recognizing different perspectives and how individuals see the world. It's their personal point of view, and it's shaped by their life experiences, their values, their current state of mind, and a lot of other things. And as leaders, the first thing we can observe is what we can learn from the perspective of others, and how we need to consider those different viewpoints, and in situations and making better decisions. So, it is a challenge for the propane industry, and we may not be as diverse as we want to be, but we need to keep that customer top of mind, and we need to consider that as the world gets more diverse and more global and more connected, that those perspectives change. And we do live in a world that goes fast, and we don't always take the time to step back. But when we're going fast, leaders often confuse their perspective with reality and don't consider others, and sometimes that customer. So I think about a lot of specific functions and things like product development, which is super important to our customers. And customer insights should drive new product ideas. And increasingly, customers want things to fit their unique needs and want them to be delivered by companies that share their experiences as well as their beliefs. So I think there's a huge linkage between diversity and not only making good decisions, but really great business decisions.
Thank you. And I think McKinsey would agree with you with that as well. They've done those studies. So there's the linkage there. Is diversity really driving smarter decisions? And that's really thoughtful input there, Regina. We do have a question from the audience, and I think this is a good, send them in, folks. This is a discussion. Ford Dubos asks, kind of a two-part question, and we can take the first part now. What are some of the common challenges faced by marginalized groups in our workforce? Do any of you on the call here have a sense of what some of those challenges are in the workplace today?
I would say, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would say, really just finding a space to have their voices be heard, right? We can make that easier by inviting them in instead of them feeling like they have to figure out a way to get in themselves, right? And so again, I think we go back to broadening the audience on decisions and projects. If it's an operational situation or a project that we need to brainstorm on, we don't need to just bring operations folks in, right? We should look and say what customer service individual can join us, who from the corporate office has some insight into this, and bring those perspectives in and open that up, right? And I think that is a challenge sometimes for our underrepresented groups, not knowing how exactly to get their voice heard or get that space at the table. So we've got to figure out how to open that invitation a bit.
Yeah.
I think when we're looking at it from trying to recruit at the driver level and the very small pool of diverse applicants that are even out there, when you talk about the CDLs only being, I think you said somewhere between 7 and 10% of CDLs are even owned by someone of an underrepresented group. We have to look at the physicality of the work, and we have to look at innovation and automation. How can we make that work actually less physically demanding? But then it's also removing our own biases, especially in the hiring process, and making sure that we're working with our field managers and that we're setting that vision that removes the bias and that gives an opportunity for the best applicant in the right place at the right time for every job within our organization.
Absolutely. Kim.
Speaking to a couple of other things, access. Sometimes when people are coming into a new environment, particularly, let's just take in some of the salaried positions that we have as we talk about bringing talent in, maybe into your marketing organization or finance or other groups that support in our industry. access is important. And so that's where programs like mentoring come into play. Because if you don't know, if you're the first in your family, if you're the first to go in a particular industry, having that access, because as we know, our industry is often based on networks that have been built over time. So someone new coming in, while they might be great, they might be smart, their access may be limited. And so this is where programs like mentoring are very important. I think the other thing is just thinking about career development overall. It's very important for marginalized groups and also for groups, all groups, that career development is important. And so looking at the programs that you have that says if someone really wants to move into management or supervisory roles, if someone wants to move from management into leadership, what are you doing to help? What are the programs that you have? And are those programs embracing diversity and inclusion? Are they creating an open door or are they closing a door? So I think that's the other piece that's important. Do you have programs that help for those individuals that want to move ahead? There's that opportunity there, and there's something that is programmatic that can be seen by all and obtained by all that put the effort in.
Thank you. Excellent.
gonna-
Absolutely agree. Great points. Regina.
Yeah, I was just going to build on what Kimberly said. She talked a lot about earlier about engagement. She talked about mentorship just now, right? Really important things. And there's so many things that we can do to let our employees know. And they may not even be formal things, but things we can do to let our employees know that they belong, right? And one thing I did, it just reminded me of one thing that I did just last week. It was a newer female in the organization. And I sent her a note and it just said, keep doing what you're doing. And I just wanted you to know that I noticed your contributions. And I wanted her to feel inspired to speak up, right? And I wanted her to feel engaged. And I wanted her to know that, we celebrated me encouraging her, right? Because it's then she's less likely to seek out other employment. So I think there's things that we can do in very little ways that can be impactful to, those in the organization so that they can feel engaged and that they're that belonging.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, let's go back to that premise that diversity drives better decisions. So, there are a few examples I think that you gave us, Regina, and others. But Lisa, are we making smarter decisions because of diverse workforces? What do you think diversity brings to the team and to the decisions that are made for the company?
I can give you a somewhat specific example. We have a tenured marketing executive that is really sought out diversity in his department because he's so well aware how much that diversity of thought connects us to our customers. And, he also understands that he didn't grow up with social media, and having people around him that did grow up with social media just makes us that much more effective. And the more voices, the more diversity that we have within our company, the better that we connect with our current customers and with potential customers. I think we all want to do business with someone that understands us, that understands our needs, and that we can connect with.
So kind of those diverse backgrounds coming together, older, youth and age, and just getting the best of everything out of it. That's a great goal. Jennifer, are we stuck in old traditions? If so, what do you think we should do about that?
Yeah, I think there are kind of a lot of traditions in the industry, right? I think in order to push forward and recognize, I think, the change and innovation that has to happen to keep the industry relevant, we've got to bring in different perspectives. One thing that we've done at Thompson Gas is we've really enhanced our internship program, which has allowed us to target, obviously, younger generation, but also more diverse candidates from a racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, and instead of simply putting the interns in our corporate office roles, we've created a field management intern program. And so it's amazing to see when we get these young, thoughtful, college students into our branch operations with our really tenured and experienced propane veterans, the magic that can happen. And I almost feel like the veterans get more out of it than the interns sometimes, which is exactly what we're trying to promote. And so we're really cognizant about every training that we have. If we're doing leadership development, being really, really thoughtful about who we're bringing together to ensure that we're getting that balance within each training that we do or each project that we're running. It's going to make the change that is inevitably coming for us to keep up a little bit easier. And we're preparing those kind of more tenured industry folks for, I think, the change that's coming. And so I think we all need to be thinking in that realm for sure.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of heard an element in there also about, you don't have to necessarily have turned the wrench or run a branch or whatever to be given the opportunity at Thompson.
Absolutely. That's it. I think the technical knowledge and skills are really, really important, but they don't equal, the perfect profile for leadership, right? And so someone that shows really great leadership aptitude can learn the technical skills. One of our biggest success stories specifically out of our internship program is a young lady that we brought in 2 years ago into our field management internship program in the upper Midwest area. We hired her on after the internship program, and she went through a rotation learning the business from A to Z. She's now a 23-year-old young woman running 2 branches for us in Wisconsin. And she certainly didn't come out of a truck, but she has her CDL now, and she understands the technical pieces of the business and has a great deal of respect from the individuals that are reporting to her. So it can be successful. We've just gotta kind of take the chances where we see them.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Kim, how are you seeing the impact of diversity on making better decisions and having better outcomes from it?
Well, if I just look at, again, our operations in AmeriGas specifically as a part of UGI, since we're talking about propane, first of all, I'll just even start off with someone that everyone knows in this organization, Michelle Benson Maggie. Michelle is just a true leader in the industry inside of our organization. She goes beyond being, general counsel for AmeriGas. She is a business driver. She understands the industry, understands our customer. And then I look at other women in our organization, Jennifer Jackson, who again is another person that has worked very closely with women in propane, Jess Sontag. We have just so many great women that are in regional director roles, in customer engagement leadership roles. We have a great woman that's a veteran. She's a veteran as well. So you think about multiple aspects of diversity, right? She's a veteran. She's also a woman, and she's out leading in our field operations. So, look at all these different aspects of how women are leading in the organization. And I'll just pick on Sue for just a second, because I really love the fact she's been on our diversity council. Not only was she engaging women, but she was also engaging veterans. All of our veterans now put their patch of their military service on their uniform. So you think about difference of thought. There's a couple of reasons why they chose to do that. One, again, touching the customer. Two, showing pride in what they've gone through as a collective to be veterans and to let other veterans know this is an inclusive company for those who have served. And all of that was heavily driven by a lot of the work that Sue was doing. And just her thought of, hey, not only should we be thinking about veterans as employees, but also how do we appeal to our customer base and think about how we're letting people know we support those who served. And so all of that effort that has been put into place, and everything that group of women that I just named touch, you can see it in their results. They're leading in their regions or their roles, they're leading in the organization, and they're bringing all of who they are from a diversity perspective in. When you meet any of those women, when they're in the room, they speak from their perspective, and it is a bigger, richer discussion because they weigh in from their perspective on decisions.
Absolutely. And I'll just say the fact that I knew many of the women you just named, and many of us on this call and on the panel and in our audience, I'm sure do as well. And that speaks volumes to not just getting a job done, but to but to the company embracing diversity, and for them to get out there and actually have a real impact on not just your profits, but on women and veterans and others who participate in this great industry. So that just speaks volumes. Thank you for that. Well, let's move on, because one of, I think, the challenges is, how do we really bring in the talent? A number of you have talked about intern programs and getting people in the door and just bringing them in. And once we have them, helping them. In fact, Women in Propane had a webinar just on this topic earlier this year, which was fascinating as well. We got some interesting perspectives of, having young women drivers show up and put some propane in your tank, and the impact that they had on others that they worked with. So Regina, can you kick us off on this one? How do we appeal to younger generations and then keep that talent?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we see the potential of their folks. And I think it's, understanding what that broad, network of folks wants to do with their career. And I think it's, understanding that, more diverse companies lure better talent and they have reduced turnover. One thing we've tried to do at Enova is we've worked hard to foster that environment that celebrates diversity, specifically in our operations organization. And year over year, we've increased our female workforce by 5%. And so you've got to start somewhere, right? And so you've got to, reach out to that talent. You've got to engage with that talent. And as I mentioned before, you need to make sure that they feel like they belong.
Absolutely. And Jennifer, you've mentioned you've launched a very successful internship program. So tell me, how's that helping with recruiting and retention?
Yeah. I mean, it really does help. I think, one of the angles that we take when we're advertising and discussing opportunities with potential intern candidates is really focusing on, propane as a clean energy and an alternative energy. And that is something that the younger generation is really passionate about. And those are the questions that they have and the type of industry that they want to align with. And a lot of times propane is just not something that they've ever thought about, right? So it is an educational process. And so for us, it's year round. It's doing presentations at colleges and networking at that level and just trying to get that message out. And then our former interns are our best recruiters, right? And so when they're having really positive experiences in the industry and with a company, they're telling others about it. And so that's that kind of spread of the good word has really helped us in that regard. But, once we're lucky enough to get some of those star interns on, and placed in full-time positions with us, like that's really when the hard work begins, because we've got to keep them energized and engaged and keep developing them. And so you have to be really thoughtful and you have to have a process and a plan around that. And we do that through a number of different programs and really trying to identify them and give them opportunities to just be a part of the business from A to Z as often as we can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. Okay, let's get to our topic about how diversity drives business growth. That's why we're here. We've got a number of people on the line who tuned in for how can we really grow our businesses by being more diverse, and what are the benefits and what are the outcomes, and what are the how-tos as well. So Regina, would you kick us off there about you and I have talked on the side about statistics and profit from diversity. I also threw out a few numbers earlier on. What are your thoughts on this, the impact on business growth?
Thanks, Bridget. And I'd like to build on what you already started to talk about, right? Because you mentioned that McKinsey study and the fact that companies in that top quartile for having gender diversity on their executive teams, were more likely to have above average profitability. I think what's really interesting about that, if you double click, is how that number has changed over time, and that number has continued to grow, right? So the importance of having gender diversity on your executive team has increased in terms of the above average profitability that those companies have. So to me, it makes sense to me. It was one of the reasons why I was excited to join Enova. And I think, we need to continue to remind ourselves that the most diverse companies are now more likely than ever to outperform their diverse peers on profitability as well as meeting the needs of their customers. That same study, the other thing that I thought was shocking was that more than a third of the companies in that study still had no women at all on their executive teams, right? So that speaks to the lack of progress across all industries. So again, this is not specific to our industry. But the one thing that they appealed to was, and Jennifer already mentioned it, is having a system and a process, right? To really lead the company through how to improve in this area. And then the last thing that's really, really important is for leadership to hold themselves accountable, right? So you can have all the great programs in the world, but if you don't hold yourself accountable to delivering on those goals, that's most important in terms of moving the needle in this space.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it can be a lot of work, honestly, to build a diverse team. So, there's a message in there, right? Become diverse and hold on to it. It's good for business. Okay. I note that according to a study by Glassdoor, 57% of employees think their company should be doing more to increase diversity. So that's a majority. Employees care about diversity in the workplace and want to work in diverse, inclusive environments. The majority of American employees not only want to see their companies invest in diversity, but think they can be doing more to increase diversity. So, we've talked about a number of things. I mean, I love the idea of putting something on a uniform and wearing it proudly out there in customer base. Small steps for big results. So, Lisa, you mentioned 40% of your leadership team are women. What are some of the things that you think are really easing the ability to drive business and create a diverse workforce at Ferrellgas?
First and foremost is treating people like people and understanding that we're dealing with a whole person and work is only one facet of that. It's avoiding burnout. It's making sure that our employees are taking their paid time off, and it's being flexible wherever we can be flexible. And creating that work-life balance not only helps us retain employees, but that's what attracts people. That's what's going to attract the younger generation. ESG is important to them. Knowing that they work at a place where there's a why is important to them, and knowing that they work for a company that wants to give back in the communities where they are. But I think that work-life balance has a lot to do with it, especially when it comes to gender diversity. COVID put a lot of children back in the homes, and it's really made it hard for women. And I don't think that the childcare situation in our country has been completely figured out yet. So whenever we can find that flexibility, and that flexibility is for the family, it's not only for the woman that's working for us, maybe it's for the husband that's working for us as well, helping him to find flexibility so that his family can have what they need as far as childcare goes. So to me, it's just looking at the person as a whole person.
That's great advice. Thank you. Paula, you work with a smaller company. We'd love your thoughts to have the smaller company perspective on how you're able to leverage diversity to build the business and to attract a diverse workforce team.
Sure. I think it's important to remember that a lot of the companies in the propane industry are small businesses, right? And you may not have an HR department. That doesn't mean that you can't build a diverse workforce. So, I always like to stick out my hand and say, hi, I'm Paula. It's nice to meet you. Tell me about your experience. So next time you're at an NPGA event, go talk to a woman, go talk to a young person, go speak to someone who has a different ethnicity than you, and learn about what they want out of an employer. And getting that firsthand knowledge from someone when you don't have an HR department, I think is a really good way to help these smaller companies grow and become more diverse.
Mm-hmm. That's a great perspective. Thank you so much. Let's jump back to Jennifer. What has Thomson Gas been doing to promote diversity in the workplace, to bring on a diverse team?
Yeah, I think the voice of the employee is really important in this, right? So I think when you look at that study, it's about what people are looking for in an employer and what they think their employers could do better. And we have to be really careful not to make assumptions about what we think our workforce wants, right? And I think a company of any size can do this. But if you want to start looking at diversity seriously, and looking at putting programs in place, you need to start with asking employees about what they see, what they think, and what they want, right? So how do they think we're doing today? What do they want to see more of? What do they want to see less of, right? And not to kind of make decisions in a bubble. And I think if you can do that and consistently make sure you're bringing in the voice of the employee, then it's about them. And that's really ultimately what this is about, right? It's a very personal thing. Belonging and inclusion is very personal. I can't make an assumption about what that means for someone. I can do my best to try to walk in their shoes, but I need to just engage in open conversation. And so for us, that starts with like kind of building an environment of psychological safety. Our leadership development programs that we've put in place over the last couple of years are 100% kind of around emotional intelligence, building trust, having open conversations with your employees. And it's a big shift for a lot of managers that have come up in this industry. And so we've really invested very, very heavily in that, because we feel like if a manager has a space to be vulnerable with their employees, then their employees are going to be vulnerable with them. And that's the start of all of this, right? So that's something that we're investing in heavily, and really trying to kind of change the look of how we lead and manage, and giving people permission to be real and to be open and to be vulnerable. Then when you have a question, or you're unsure about something, or you're not feeling like a part of something, you feel safer to express that. And I think that's a really big piece that we can't overlook in this.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great approach. I'm curious how you deal with the folks that have those challenges adapting.
Yeah, I think look, there's always slow adapters. I think all we can do is continue to educate, and continue to give an open space for people to ask questions. And not everyone's going to get on board. But we have to focus on the people that are on board, and then continue to put the right stuff in front of the slower adapters, right? And they're either going to jump on board or not. But even if they take one little nugget that can make their life better, or have a different perspective on something, then I think we're doing what we're here to do.
Mm-hmm.
Also have to kind of set tone from the top too. Literally this morning, I was just meeting with our compensation committee of our board, talking about things like our engagement survey and where we are from a diversity statistics perspective. And so starting with our executive leadership team, our board, all the way throughout our leadership, it's important to have that tone from the top. It's built into our values. So if you have a manager or a leader that says, I'm not so sure this is what I want to do, well, that's a part of how we evaluate performance. That's who we are, right? That's the journey that we're on. And when you think about too, from the perspective of development and psychological safety, do you visibly show employees that this is important, that they have that space? So one of the things that's been important for us is we have a diversity council, a diversity team. If you're a small company, you don't have to have a council. You could just get a group of employees and have an engagement team. But what's important is we hear our leaders who are on that council and our employees who are on that council share ideas. And one of the things that came up was, hey, we need to think more under belonging about psychological safety. So we said, look, we're not going to have the answers internally. And we brought in a series of industrial psychologists to just come in and give presentations about what is psychological safety, and to have open dialogues and roundtable discussions with, employees calling in from the field, in conference rooms, chatting about this. And that's really given that open dialogue, because you've got leaders driving that, but also hearing the information coming from employees. And I think that's really a big part of diversifying your organization. It's tone from the top, but then also too, making sure that the employees are being able to have that open dialogue. So whatever type of council or teams that you form that may work on diversity and inclusion internally, it has to have an employee element, and it has to have a leadership element, sitting down together and having crucial conversations.
Thanks, Kim. You know, you're reminding me that when we had a discussion about this session a week ago, you said know your demographics. And I think that's a great point. Do you want to just elaborate on that one for the audience today?
Yeah, I think it's important, demographics aren't your final destination and it's not some forced area that you're trying to go to, but your demographics tell your story, right? Your demographics tell you who's coming into your organization, who are you missing? If you can take your customer demographics and your employee demographics, look at them. Are we missing a group that could come in that could really help us? I always take a lesson from the auto industry, who very early on understood who makes decision of buying cars in the household. It's women. And so they really started to put a lot of research and development and hired women to lead. GM and Ford hired a lot of women to lead their research and development to make sure they were having that input in marketing and all of those different areas. And so again, knowing your demographics, in most cases, there's 5 generations in the workplace, 5 generations in the workplace. So if you're only focused on one generation, you can't just be focused on early career, because you're going to forget the people that are still in the organization that want to work and do not want to retire and have great knowledge. If you're only focused on, you can only get to the top after so many years, you're going to lose the folks that have come in, that you've trained and are saying, I'll take an opportunity in another industry. So you have to understand your demographics and then develop your programming, not a program, but multiple things that you work on that will touch these different constituencies and then also knit them together.
Good advice. Thank you. I like that parallel to the car industry. Okay, well, at this point, I would like to quickly bring up a poll. Let's find out from our audience what your company is doing. So how does your organization address diversity today? Do you have dedicated staff on it? Do you have dedicated programs? Do you have dedicated programs or training? Do you have no programs in place? Or if you're not sure what the company's doing, that's fine too. So use your controls here. Let's see if we can get to 80% pretty quickly, and we will show those results for everyone on the call. Just give it another second. We're halfway there, 58%, where it's moving along quickly. I would love to read out the question we just received while we're waiting. As someone who's been blessed with the ADHD superpower, it's been a pleasure listening to the panel's approach and thoughts around neurodivergent talent. Diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging is such a journey, both professionally and personally. Thank you for shining a glimmering light on it for our industry. Thank you, Sarah. That's much appreciated. We appreciate your comments and your questions. We are at 79% on the diversity program vote. So I'm going to call the poll here and let's share those results. And as you can see, we have some good work in place, but the majority of the folks here, well, not really the majority, but a number of them have no programs. At the moment, we have 26% who have both dedicated staff and a program. It's awesome. Equally, we have 26% who have a program or training. And we have almost 10% that are not sure if their company has anything in place, which could mean that they likely do not. And 40% said they are not aware of any program, that there are no programs in place. So it's interesting. Well, we're getting close on time. We've got kind of one last section I'd like to get through about the barriers for diversity. Let's see if we can give our audience, we've given them a lot of take-home ideas and thoughts and just feel good feelings about this. I'm feeling really excited about where we're going with diversity and propane. But if we can just get back to very quickly, Jennifer, you want to kick us off on what are the barriers here? And our poll might actually be quite illustrative in that one.
Yeah, sure. I think a really kind of current barrier that's rearing its head is kind of this fear of customer backlash with the Bud Light moments and things that are happening currently. And so it's we're in a scary spot to think that we could lose some of the momentum as leaders make decisions out of fear. And so I think it's really important that those of us that have programs underway, that we continue to push that from the top and educate why it's important to keep that going. Because I think that could end up being a really big barrier for some companies.
Mhm. Right. Lisa, would you like to jump in on that one as well, the barriers?
I think for the propane industry specifically, we have a long history of being non-diverse. And one of the barriers is just, it's a big ship and it's moving slowly, but it is moving. You know, Michelle being the NPGA, the president of the board there, that was exciting. And we need to continue that momentum. The associations have changed. We, you know, just the way that the meetings are being held and the way that things are being conducted, the men that are coming into the women in propane sessions because they know that there's value there. I think as an industry, we're moving forward, but it's just slow. And we're just going to have to keep pushing. We're going to have to keep pushing.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to jump in on those barriers? We have a Paula. Would you like to jump in there with what we can do potentially to catch up here?
I just wanted to echo what Kimberly mentioned earlier, which is mentoring. You know, the Women in Propane Council offers a free mentorship program to all NPGA members. It's on the website. You can get matched with the right people. It's a great way to introduce a new employee for training. And I think we also need to remember to look at those at the veterans and the people with STEM education. You know, those individuals are highly trained and highly trained problem solvers.
Absolutely. And we have a question then is basically asking, you know, for those for the 40% there that really don't have a program right now, what are the small steps to get started and next steps to take? You know, walking away from this today, what's kind of the, you know, the things to get involved? Kim, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll start with that. You know, first of all, the last thing to shut down barriers is the lack of communication is a big barrier, right? That's what leads to the fear. That's what leads to things going slow. So I remember a couple of years ago when Nancy and Michelle asked me to speak at the national conference and do a workshop. And part of that was to just start the dialogue and don't stop the dialogue. Yeah, things will get scary. Things will get, you know, things don't always progress as fast as we would hope. But don't stop the dialogue. Don't stop the thought process, because that is what keeps employees engaged. And that's what keeps things moving forward. If you're just starting off, couple of things. First of all, take a pulse of the employees. Take a pulse of your employees. You'll be surprised about the ideas that will come from employees that you can start to plant a seed. The other thing is get involved with community organizations. You don't have to do everything yourself. First of all, Women in Propane, perfect place to start. Lots of resources. Lean into that. Even if it's something as simple as, why don't we get all of our employees to sit and listen on a webinar together and then have a dialogue afterwards to start the talk? And then secondly, take a very structured, time-bound approach. You can't boil the ocean and do everything in 1 year. In fact, that's what causes burnout. But if you say, you know what, we're just going to cast a wider net in recruiting, and we're going to go to these 2 schools that we've never recruited from before, but they have a high concentration of diverse and female talent. And so we're going to go there and we're going to talk to the school first and develop a relationship and then go there and recruit. You'll be surprised. And then that builds because they've got an alumni network and then they have connections. So take small steps, time-bound steps, engage your employees. And again, don't be afraid of the dialogue. We learn,
Right.
we learn when we talk.
That's right.
Sage, helpful advice. Guys, we're almost out of time, but we've got a lightning round. I would love to see if we can get through here. I'm going to give you a quick question and you're going to give me hopefully a 1-word yes or no or a 1-word answer and tell me in 9 words or less why. So here's the first question. So then, how will diversity impact the propane industry over the next few years? Lisa.
Innovation, new thoughts equal new ideas.
Love it. Regina.
Profitability. We need to invest in this space and move fast.
Jennifer.
Change, comfort with change and ease to move into change.
Kim
Talent, great talent.
and Paula.
Growth.
Love it. Awesome. Okay. Here's an interesting fact from the New York Times analysis. There are almost as many men named John in American leadership roles as there are women, period. 25, I've got to hurry up here. 25 Fortune 500 CEOs are women, while 23 are named John. So for this next lightning round, do you agree? Yes or no? Within the next 3 years, will Ferrellgas no longer be the only major US propane marketer with a woman at the helm? Could it actually happen? Yes or no? And why? I'm going to start with you, Lisa. What's your thoughts?
Anything can happen, but we've got to start a lot of work right now.
True. Regina?
I agree. I'm optimistic on the progress we can make.
Jennifer?
Yeah, fingers crossed, right? But yeah, we have a lot of work to do, but we can do it together.
All right. Kimberly?
We're getting the right women, getting operational and field and headquarters types of experiences. It can happen. It can definitely happen.
All right. And Paula?
Yes, can't stop progress.
Absolutely. Right from the head of the Women in Propane Council. Let's make it happen. Okay, so if a company has no diversity program, what is the one thing they can start doing right now? Lisa?
Vision. You have to know where you want to go.
Absolutely. Regina?
I'd say identify biases and come up with an action plan.
Jennifer?
Talk to your employees, see what they need and want.
Love it. Kimberly?
Spend time defining what diversity and belonging are going to mean to you and your organization. Develop a mission plan.
Excellent. And Paula?
Referrals. Think about asking for referrals outside of your inner circle.
Okay, awesome. And our final question, which could prove more detrimental for our industry? A lack of diversity or the ongoing anti-fossil fuel sentiment and regulation? Which one and why? Lisa?
Two sides of one coin. They go together. We need a diverse chorus of voices singing the benefits of propane as we go forward.
Absolutely. Regina?
The diversity, because it helps solve the latter.
Jennifer?
I'm in complete agreement. We can't have one without the other.
Excellent. Kim?
Got to have both.
Paula?
Agreed, and change the conversation. You know, propane is really better for the environment than some other green initiatives.
Well, that's a pretty resounding. We need to have diversity in our industry. We need to keep on it and celebrate its successes. So this discussion has certainly underscored the work that remains to be done, even as the case for greater diversity becomes more and more compelling. We live in a deeply connected world, and it should come as no surprise that more diverse companies and institutions are achieving better performance. Most organizations must do more to take full advantage of the opportunity that diverse leadership teams represent. That's particularly true for their talent pipelines, attracting, developing, mentoring, sponsoring, and retaining the next generations of global leaders at all levels of organizations, as we have heard so eloquently put today by our wonderful panel. Thank you. So given the higher returns that diversity is showing, it can bring improve innovation, ease recruitment, give us diverse perspective, and make tangible increases in productivity and performance. So let me suggest it is better to invest right now, since winners will pull further ahead and laggards will pull further behind, fall further behind. So a huge thank you to our panel today for their expert insight, their championship of diversity, and coming today and sharing with us all. Thank you, Kimberly, Jennifer, Lisa, Paula, and Regina. Really appreciate the insights today. I also want to thank the Women of Propane organization for being at the forefront of diversity and inclusion in our industry. I could not be more proud of the history of our organization, of the take action attitude mentality of its 600+ members, and personally for allowing me the opportunity to be so closely involved with this important work. And finally, thank you to all of you out there, men and women. Thank you for coming today, our friends and supporters. I hope that this session and those incredibly accomplished women we have heard from today have inspired you. There will be steps forward, there will be steps backward, but together, step by step, we can and will make a difference. Rout out sexism and racism in our industry, give new opportunity to all, not requiring certain groups to prove themselves first, but seeing the potential, valuing the diversity, and driving our business growth in ways rarely imagined ever before. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.